Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. The reported death toll from Israeli attacks on Gaza raid sites yesterday has now risen to 39, according to the Gaza Civil Defense Agency. Questions have been raised by humanitarian groups over the safety of GHF aid sites in Gaza following potentially hundreds of casualties. Meanwhile, anti-government protesters in Israel have marched to the US Embassy in Tel Aviv, demanding an immediate hostage deal and end to the war in Gaza. Former hostage Doron Steinbrecher takes part in the march as ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas stall. Ukraine says that more than 1 million Russian soldiers have died in the ongoing war since February the 24th, 2022. It comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Kyiv has offered a new round of direct talks with Moscow set for next week. Syria's interior minister says that violent clashes in the Druze majority city of Sweda have halted after reports of further fighting. Israel and Syria have agreed to a US-brokered ceasefire after Israeli military action over the sectarian violence. Hong Kong has issued a T10 hurricane signal, the highest warning as Typhoon Whipper heads closer to Hong Kong. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled with a considerable threat as winds could reach 140 kilometres per hour. At least 10 people have died, with others missing after heavy rainfall leading to flash flooding and landslides. Search and rescue operations are ongoing, with fears that the death toll could rise. Japanese citizens are heading to the polls with voting in the tightly contested upper house election. In a key test for Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, the potential for a loss of LDP-led coalition majority could lead to political instability. A man has been charged with assault with a deadly weapon following an incident in LA where a car drove into a crowd of people outside of a nightclub. Dozens were injured, with many in a critical or serious condition, that according to local emergency services. We start this hour in the Middle East, and the Israeli Defense Forces have issued a new evacuation warning for Palestinians living in the southwest of Deir al-Balah in the central Gaza Strip. This is the first round of operation in this particular area since the war began. IDF had previously avoided ground operations in Deir al-Balah due to the presence of hostages held by Hamas. An IDF spokesperson, Colonel Avichai Adrei, announced that the military will expand its operations into areas it has not previously entered, aiming to destroy Hamas's infrastructure and capabilities. Civilians in the area have been instructed to move south to the Mawasi region along the coast. As of May, Israeli ministry estimates that around 350 Palestinians are residing in central Gaza, but it remains unclear how many will be affected by this evacuation. Well, joining us to discuss this latest update from the Gaza Strip, Ali Emma Bushback, a Middle East researcher, joining us from Cairo. Ali, we've just mentioned there that this area has not been issued evacuation warnings in the past. Israeli military activity has been limited due to an understanding that hostages may be held in this region. Does this potentially signal a shift in Israeli mentality towards Hamas, given hostages potentially might be dead or alive in the area?
Joshua, thank you for having me. The situation in Gaza, in fact, is completely dire, while Israelis continue for its operation Guardian's chariots, and since the beginning of May 2025, so that the situation it's increased, and the Israelis militant operation is escalating day after day. The order and for evacuation area, it's increased week after week, while also meanwhile Palestinian militant operation escalated its operation against Israeli forces, and we have witnessed several of news that there is casualties from Israeli militant in Khan Yunis especially, and also in Beit Hanun and Jabalia. So also the fighting between Palestinian resistance Hamas and between Israel, it's completely escalating. That's lead Israeli forces to order the civilian from fighting zone to escalate this area and to extending its militant operation or militant offensive in Gaza. So also, despite that, Israel proposed that it's going to create a concentrate zone in Rafah while gather all the Palestinian population from Gaza, around 2 million person in this area, which completely condemned by the international community and the Security Council, that United Nations Security Council and the United agencies. All of them condemned the Israelis' proposal to forcibly displace the Palestinian to Rafah and create a humanitarian zone in that area. As well as Joshua, about the hostages, I guess Israel is not going to release the hostages or captive from Gaza, except in the negotiation and talk ways, because we have witnessed in November 2024 several of Israel has condemned a militant operation to release the hostages in Al-Mawasi in Al-Nusayrat, but unfortunately it's failed after the clashes between the captive, between the people or the security guard who save or who kept the captive or kept the hostages with them and with Israeli troops, and it's completely created a catastrophe, and it was a tragic day in Al-Nusayrat in 2024 November.
Yes.
So I guess there is no method to release the hostages except the talk and the negotiation. And about displace the Palestinian in Deir al-Balah, Israel is going to apply its plan to move the Palestinian from north and central Gaza toward Rafah, especially after destroying all the city and creating a tent or creating a camp at that area.
Yes, Ali, I'd like you to stay with us because we're going to move away from the situation on the ground in Gaza to now look at diplomacy. But first, tens of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets of Tel Aviv, demanding a deal to secure the release of all hostages currently held in Gaza. Protesters marched from Hostage Square to the US Embassy branch, carrying banners and chanting for the immediate return of the captives and an end to the ongoing war. Former hostages released by Hamas joined the demonstration, urging Israeli leaders and US President Donald Trump to push for a comprehensive agreement. Smaller protests were also held in other parts of the country, including Karka Junction and Rothschild Street. The rally comes amid ongoing negotiations between Israel and Hamas. Many such rallies are being constantly organised in Israel. Well, I understand that Ali is just facing some technical challenges, so while we wait for him, let's have a look at the context of this situation. Of course, a war that started on October the 7th, 2023, an attack by Hamas that saw the death of over 1,000 Israelis, also hostages, over 250 taken back into Hamas. That has seen an escalation of military activity from Israel in the Gaza Strip, which continued until a ceasefire was agreed. However, after the first stage of that ceasefire, fighting and hostilities resumed with no second phase agreed upon. The situation in the Gaza Strip extremely difficult. Reports from NGOs and charities that the humanitarian crisis is worsening. Blockade on aid reportedly leading to famine and hunger. And now, of course, further efforts are ongoing. But with hostages being held by Hamas still, rhetoric in Israel is turning against the government in some areas, looking towards a hostage release and an end to the war as a priority. Ali, thank you for once again joining us. Let's look at the thoughts in Israel. Of course, there are pockets which do want this war to end, mainly because of the hostage situation. That coming as negotiations are still ongoing between Israel and Hamas indirectly, but currently still no pressure. What do you think is needed with both sides in certain areas looking for an end to this conflict? What do you think is needed to get a ceasefire deal over the line, even if it is just the US proposed 60-day ceasefire, in order to then look towards a permanent end to the fighting and a return of hostages, prisoners, and a return to normality for millions of those living in Gaza? Well, it seems that we have lost Ali, but we will, of course, continue to bring you all of the updates on the ongoing situation in Gaza and calls and work towards the end of this conflict. Discussions still ongoing, optimism from the United States and Israel, and we will bring you those. But now we do bring some breaking news to you, and a tsunami warning has been issued after a series of 3 powerful earthquakes which have struck off the Pacific coast of Russia. The quakes, which occurred near Petropavlovsk and Khmelnytsky, include a magnitude 7.4 tremor, along with 2 others of magnitude 6.7. The quakes hit within 32 minutes of each other, with a previous 5.0 magnitude earthquake reported shortly before. The epicenter was located about 140 kilometers east of the Kamchatka region's capital. Of course, with those warnings at play, we will be monitoring the situation and bringing you further updates on any potential ramifications for those living within the region. We move on now, though, and Russia's defense ministry says 142 drones were shot down overnight across several regions, including 27 over the Moscow area and some above the Black Sea. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin confirmed that 4 of the drones were headed towards the capital, Moscow, and were intercepted early on Sunday morning. The widespread drone activity disrupted operations at 4 major airports serving Moscow: Sheremetyevo, Vnukovo, Domodedovsk and Zhukovsky, forcing the diversion of 134 flights. By 10 a.m. local time, only Vnukovo and Grabskevo airports remain shut. Authorities have not attributed the drone strikes to a specific source yet, but they come amid rising cross-border tensions and previous claims of Ukrainian drone incursions. This marks one of the largest single-day drone interceptions over Russian territory to date. Well, joining us to discuss this news, of course, in the wake of comments from Volodymyr Zelensky, which we will also touch on, Marian Duris, a European affairs expert, joining us live from Brussels. Marian, thank you ever so much for taking the time. What's the significance of a Ukrainian drone attack reported to be in the triple digits in terms of the number of military facilities and assets used, especially if it did target Moscow? Hello, Marian. Just checking you can hear me okay.
Yes, I hear you now, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just repose my question. What's the significance of this level of Ukrainian drone strikes, specifically if reports are to believe and be believed Moscow was targeted?
Yeah, so the attacks like this is happening very, very often, I would say. But in times of war or conflict, propaganda becomes a powerful tool used by all sides to control the narrative. Casualties or numbers in these attacks are often framed selectively, minimized when it's on our side and amplified when it's the enemy in case of casualties. So emotional images, stories, and language are used to generate outrage, justify action, and realize support, while inconvenient truths are downplayed or hidden. The goal isn't objective truth, but to shape public opinion, maintain a morale, and influence maybe international perception. In this way, propaganda turns real human suffering into a weapon of influence. And if I would say about Western world, a certain type of propaganda is currently preferred that tries to downplay the reality on the front. But if someone looks at where the fighting is taking place and what the trends are on the battlefield, they probably have an idea of what is true and what is a distortion of reality.
Yes, Marian, let's now look at the timing of these reported drone strikes. Of course, overnight, in his nightly address, Volodymyr Zelensky said that he had proposed to Moscow a further round of talks, a third round of direct talks between the two countries that could take place next week in Istanbul. Is it interesting that these drone strikes have come directly after those comments from Zelensky, and what might be the intentions of Ukraine around these timings?
Yes, it's happening even before this type of talks, and purpose is quite obvious in these times, and it's to make the biggest possible gains or make or create the biggest security threats to the other side in this sense, and to make your position in the talks better or more comfortable. What about drone strikes? Yes, in case of Ukrainian side, it's quite often what's happening because Ukraine gain much of support from not only Western countries but also from other countries. So this kind of stuff of material or drones material is they are cool, they are goodly resourced in this case. We say about Kiev. So yes, it can happen even before this type of talks.
Yes, so Marian, let's look ahead to these potential talks. Is there any room for optimism in the face of ultimatums from the US, in the face of a call for a 30-day ceasefire from most of Ukraine's Western allies and also Ukraine themselves? It seems Russia haven't been keen to take that step, but with this 50-day deadline from Donald Trump, do you think that there could be an unlocking of this stalemate that's been at play for months now?
Yeah, also, as I said before, weeks ago, when communication between United States and Russia was still happening very intensively, this communication is still running, of course. What about peace or some kind of ceasefire? Okay, I heard about some negativism in this case, that Donald Trump just is not satisfied with communication with Russia. But you know, always when you talk, when you have this kind of talk, you need also the other side for this talk, not just communicate your own positions. So maybe then there would be need of some compromise between so strong position of Donald Trump and between strong position and of Vladimir Putin. So I don't know if the Ukrainian position is very good in this time because they disagreed with some compromises before. Now, when we see happening on the battlefield, its positions and situation is very different. So I think even this content of the talks, diplomatic talks, will be different as was before 1 month or 2 months ago. So United States and Russia are still the most powerful actors in these talks, and when they will try to find some common way to the finish and end of this conflict, so we will see this end without regards of Ukraine will think about or maybe other actors who are supporting Ukraine right now.
Yes, absolutely, Marian. And here on NewsX World, we will, of course, bring you all the developments ahead of potential talks next week. Marian, if you stay with us, we're now going to move over to North America, and the US is rapidly expanding its migrant detention capacity, with immigration and customs enforcement set to boost bed space from 40,000 to 100,000 by the end of the year. That follows a $45 billion funding increase. According to reports, ICE is prioritising large-scale tent camps at military bases and ICE jails, including a 5,000-bed facility at Fort Bliss in Texas and others in Colorado, Indiana and New Jersey. US Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has indicated a preference for detention centres run by Republican-led states, such as Florida's controversial Alligator Alcatraz. Noem is reportedly in talks with several other states to replicate this model. Well, Marion, thank you ever so much for staying with us. Just a brief thought from you on this announcement. So much funding to be put into a key part of Donald Trump's agenda on immigration. Do you think that this move can happen? And do you think it could be a success for Trump in the face of adversity and controversy surrounding immigration arrests and immigration policy?
Donald Trump is taking the right approach to make migration because he fears the risks coming from the south. If we say just a few points. First, security and law enforcement. So enforcing border laws protects national security and upholds the rule of law. Second is deterrence. Tense and strict policies discourage illegal crossings and reduce human trafficking. Third, we can say resource management, limits strain policies, limit strain on public services like healthcare, housing, and education. Another point is order at the border, helps prevent chaos and keeps border operations organized and controlled. And in the end, I would say reflecting voter concerns. So many Americans support stronger border control and illegal immigration only. So finally, I will just deliver. Donald Trump has agreement with to export dangerous criminals to, for example, El Salvador, where the successful President Nayib Bukele is. Similarly, in Europe, Italy has made an agreement with Albania to export illegal immigrants. And I think Mr. Trump can be successful in this way. And I think the Europe, and in particular European Commission, should be still more inspired by these strong measures to prevent the entry of illegal entrants who may be a source of security risks.
Marion, thank you ever so much for your time on both of those topics. We will, of course, continue the discussion on the Trump administration moves with immigration in mind. But we now move away and head to Japan, where voters are casting votes for an upper house election that could determine the future of Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's leadership, with half of the 248 seats up for grabs. The ruling coalition of the Liberal Democratic Party and Komeito need to secure at least 50 seats to maintain its majority. However, recent setbacks and low public support have raised concerns about the coalition's ability to meet its targets. In Tokyo, voters expressed concerns about rising costs, particularly for staples like rice, and the impact of pension cuts, urging future planning to ensure pensions remain viable. They also focused on the country's economic future, particularly the need for higher wages amidst rising commodity prices. Well, we are now joined by my colleague, anchor and correspondent Asuma Kotoka, who joins us from the newsroom to discuss this further. Asuma, what more can you tell us about the significance of this upper house election with half of the near 250 seats on offer?
Yes, it's huge, as right now Japan's minority government of Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba is already in a tightrope, holding now all eyes are on this election, as next week Japan is going to be sending their top negotiator to negotiate tariffs with US. And according to recent polls, it showed that Japan's current ruling government, LDP, is not as popular as now. There's so many other popular parties that have showed up recently. And also in these polls, something that was noticeable was that Japan also is following a trend of rising popularity against immigration policies, as well as rising of conservatism, which was recently shown in, of course, the US government elections, as well as the Polish elections, as well as the German election. Well, now looking back at the upper house in Japan, they are known in Japanese as Sangin, which means House of Councilors, and they do hold the power to revise the legislative as well as delay, but they rarely block any legislature that has been passed by the lower house. And just like the UK as well as Canada and India as well, the lower house holds more power than the upper house. Now we will see what will be the outcome in the next maybe few hours. All eyes will be on this election.
Yes, absolutely. And Asuma, of course, we've seen Shigeru Ishiba involved in recent G7 discussions. Also, as you've mentioned, tariffs is a key topic of conversation. Negotiations between Japan and the US have been ongoing in the face of potential 25% tariff rates, also tariff imports on goods like the automobile industry, which Japan is a key part of. Do you think this vote is potentially more of a popularity vote on Ishiba's reign? And let's note as well, he's only been in office since August last year.
I think it's not only about popularity right now, because this LDP government has been in power for the last maybe 60 years. Ever since the last World War II, they have been in power. But right now we see a huge change and shift in Japanese consumer point of view, as they have seen the rice prices double in Japan. One minister was even, he had to give up his position as he said publicly that he does not know the prices of the price of rice in Japan, and a lot of things, as well as I mentioned earlier, that immigration in Japan, people are frustrated with increasing foreigners in Japan, and just like the trend that we saw in recent conservatism on rise, right wings on rise, that's something that we could see as a trend in Japan as well.
Asuma Kotoka, thank you ever so much for that insight. We will, of course, be monitoring those polls when they close and the initial information that comes out from the upper house in Japan. But that is all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you more on that and the rest of the world very shortly. Thank you.